So, Addi, why do you open the front of your car every morning before you drive it?
Because of the lockdown, we've all had to become mechanics in some right to attend to the day-to-day maintenance issues of our motor vehicles. Today, we're going to talk about how to check the coolant level as well as the oil in the car. We're going to start with the coolant. So, this front part of the vehicle with that cap is what we are referring to as the radiator. Inside the radiator, there's what we call a coolant. The coolant allows us to keep the engine cool as it's running. So, as the engine is running, it heats up. The coolant circulates through the engine, reducing the temperature of the engine so that it doesn't burn. To check the radiator, we need to take certain precautions. First of all, you check the radiator when the engine isn't running and after it's cooled. So don't check the radiator when the engine is hot because there's pressure buildup in the radiator, and if you open the radiator when it's hot, you might get a squirt of radiator coolant coming into your face, which isn't cool. So we're going to open the radiator cap, and you'll notice that the level of coolant is right up to the top, which is where it's supposed to be, so it's good. When you check the radiator coolant, you also need to check the cap, that the cap is still working. It should be springy, and it shouldn't have rusted. If it's rusted and the spring isn't working, you may have problems with your radiator. So I'm just going to put that back on. And why does the radiator cap need to be working properly? Because there's that pipe which is leading to the reservoir. That spring allows coolant to move from your radiator to the reservoir when the pressure builds up. So if the spring isn't working, that movement isn't going to happen and your engine may overheat. So moving to the reservoir. In the reservoir, there's additional coolant. What happens is that when your engine heats up, coolant is going to go into the reservoir. When your engine cools down, coolant is sucked from the reservoir into the radiator. So we need to make sure that there's coolant in the radiator, in the reservoir. So I'm just going to open the reservoir, and you'll notice that the level of coolant is pretty normal, and you can see that it's right up to the mark, which means we're all good. Next, we're going to get into a bit of a dirty business. We're going to check the oil level in the engine. So for this, we're going to use either a rag or a piece of paper. Make sure you've got these handy as you do this. First thing you need to make sure as you check your oil is that the engine is completely stopped and has settled. Because as the engine is running, oil is splashing around the engine, and so the marking on the oil stick will be inaccurate if your engine has just been running. So this stick here, which is yellow and says engine oil, is what we use to check the engine oil level in the vehicle. So I'm going to pull it up, and you'll notice that all the way there's some oil marks. So we're just going to wipe that off because that's not going to give us a clear indication of the oil level because the engine was running and oil was splashing all over the place. Now, if you look at this stick, you'll notice that there's a mark L, there's some diamond knurling, and then there's the mark F. L indicates that your oil level is low. F indicates that the oil tank is full. And that diamond knurling helps the oil adhere to the stick for measurement purposes. So with the stick now clean like that, I'm going to dip it in right up to the bottom so that it sits, and then I will pull it back out. And there you can see that we've got some oil on the stick. The oil is between the L and the F, which means it's good. Your oil should never be below the L or above the F. Otherwise, it's going to give you problems. It is a bit low, so we can top it up so that it comes back up to F. Coolant and oil are two things that you should check each time you have a journey. Doing these checks is typically going to take you 5 minutes or less. So it's something that you should do every day in the morning. And if you fail to do that, just make sure you do that sometime during the day when your engine is cool.